If you're an account manager, you already know this. You're the one keeping the business running. You own the client relationships, drive the revenue, and solve the tough problems for your customers. But here's the challenge. Most companies don't give account managers the training or recognition they deserve. That's what you'll get here on the Account Management Secrets podcast. I'm Alex Raymond, and after working with thousands of account managers, I know what separates the best from the rest. In this show, we cover exactly what you need to succeed, handling tough client conversations, driving renewals and upsells with confidence, and proving your value every single day. There's no fluff, no outdated sales tactics, just real practical strategies you can use right now to grow your accounts and build a successful career. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, hit subscribe and let's get into it. Welcome back to Account Management Secrets. One of the questions that I get asked all the time, and I guess this is because of my history of having been in the software world in account management, I always get asked, what's the best software for managing our accounts? What's the best software for QBRs? What's the best software for account plans? I get all these kinds of questions. And I have a lot of experience in this area. I've been in this space. I've seen a lot of companies do it well. I've also seen a lot of companies fail with these kind of projects. And what I wanted to do for this episode is get really deep into this particular topic. And so I know there are a lot of companies out there that are trying to figure out what should we do with our tech stack? How do we integrate the various systems that we have? What sort of specialized tools do we need? So it's a big topic for a lot of people. And so I invited my friend Jennifer Pinter on to the show today. Jennifer is someone that I hired back at Capta about 4.5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. And so worked with me for a long time there on implementing our customers, making sure that they were successful, making sure they were getting value out of the software they've received. And so she has also seen, many companies embark on this journey. Some do it and have great success, and others not have great success, largely because they were solving the wrong problems, or they thought they were solving the wrong problems. And so today we're going to get into that. We're going to have a conversation about what a tech stack for an account management team should look like, how to address the various questions that are going to come up, how to align your teams, and all this kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. Jennifer Pinter, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Alex. Excited to dive in on this very important topic.
Yeah, well, there's always been so much potential is my feeling about this topic, right? So every part of the business, like if you just dissect any B2B company these days, there's specialized software for pretty much everything, right? From the finance team to marketing to sales, operations, everybody's got their own, highly specialized software. And therefore, account management and customer success teams often put their hands up and say, we want our own tool as well. We're sick of working in the CRM. We want a place that has better workflows and better reporting and feels more like home for us. And that's something that you and I worked on for a long time back in the Capta days. From your point of view, and you've implemented dozens of customers, and you've worked with so many people. But from your point of view, help us understand what's the best place to start with this discussion. So if I'm like an account management leader and I'm thinking, boy, there's got to be a way we can be more effective, we can be more efficient. How do I begin this process? What should I be thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's really important to start with role clarity. What are the activities to be done or the jobs to be done of the teams that are supporting customers? This includes the beginning part of the customer journey, the prospect journey, through the second half of the bow tie, if you will, for those that are familiar with the bow tie method. It's really understanding the different touch points and activities that are going to drive value for your client and long-term growth and retention. In talking with some teams, sometimes when they come and they start looking for technology or a tech stack, they don't really have clarity on where the gaps are and where they need to really make improvements and drive the needle. So it's hard to evaluate technology when you don't have a clear understanding of what the gaps are that you're trying to fill.
It's kind of like putting the cart before the horse for a lot of people, right? So the way that I always interpreted this or experienced it at least is, people would wake up and they would have some kind of business problem, right? So either my churn is too high, or my growth is too low, or the team morale is low, or everybody's not being very efficient. They'd have some kind of like, significant business problem like that, and then immediately jump to, oh, therefore I need software to solve this, which of course software can be a part of the solution, but in my experience, it's not necessarily the only part of the solution. And so if we jump straight to software, we're not doing, like you're saying, an analysis, and we don't have a clear understanding of the jobs to be done, then we wind up maybe handicapping ourselves down the road, or then kind of putting too much onus on the software without fixing all the other things that need to be fixed inside of our business, right?
Right. And I think every company has unique requirements to support their customer, right? Obviously, there's a set of kind of standard activities that happen in the support, the sales, the support, the CS, account management space. But focusing on driving value for your customers and what activities make sense for your company is really important. I think sometimes people see, okay, well, this is what should be done. This is what other B2B companies are doing in this space. And then they have this kind of pie in the sky idea of what success looks like. And then start trying to solve for that, even though they're not actually adopting that practice yet. And so you're looking for technology when you don't actually have the practice of doing account planning, for example.
Yes. Yes. I remember these conversations very well. So, I think this is really worth thinking about here. So if you're a forward thinking account management leader and you're like, hey, I want to be doing all the right practices. So everything that we talk about on this podcast, everything we talk about within the Amplify community, I want to be doing that stuff. And then you say, well, a logical step would then be, I want a system to be able to track things and make me efficient and automate as much as I can and give me neat reports and so on and so forth. That all makes perfect sense. But you got to start with the basics. Like, you have to be doing these things first. If you've never done account planning, then software is only going to be, marginally helpful to you. If you've never done a quarterly business review, again, automating it doesn't make any sense. And so I think one of the things that we found is, and this is a big part of the motivation behind what we're doing at Amplify, for example, what we found is there was a lot of talk, but there wasn't a lot of understanding of some of the mechanics and some of the basics here. Mm-hmm. And if we don't have that in place, then that's not a good recipe for success. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think having clarity on the activities that you're trying to solve for, having alignment across your teams and what is actually going to be driving value and moving the needle in your retention and expansion motion is really important. And then understanding what the team's capacity is, right? If you're going to be implementing a software, this is going to be a heavy lift, right? In the beginning, in the first couple of months, and everyone knows, probably everyone here has been part of some kind of software implementation that did not go right. The team did not adopt the tool. Usually it's because of lack of requirements and due diligence upfront and a lack of change management, right? So pointing back into the system once it's set up and really making sure that people are adopting and using the tool. I think they say like 70% of CRM implementations fail, or they don't get adopted, right? And everyone loves to blame, Salesforce for being too difficult, for having all these fields and components. And are we over engineering the product? Are we really thinking through what our account management team actually needs to get the work done in the most effective and efficient manner so that the customer has the best experience? And I think really taking a step back and understanding what that looks like is a crucial first step.
Well, to your point about we all know there's the data on like software implementations gone wrong is
Mhm.
very long, right? There's a lot of research on this, including, by the way, a brand new report that came out from MIT this week or last week saying that 95% of the AI pilots that people are running in 2025 are failing. 95% of these are failing, and
Mhm.
then that paper is very interesting because it says, this largely is not because of the software. This has nothing to do with the LLMs. It has nothing to do with OpenAI or Anthropic or what have you.
Mhm.
Most of it has to do with the way they put it in the paper is organizational design,
Mhm.
which is kind of to your point. Like, do we know what we are doing with these tools? Do we know what the expected outcomes are? Do we have the right teams in place? Do we have the right governance in place? Do we have the right ways of interacting with one another and with the system in order to get what we want?
Mhm.
And so, to your point, a lot of this is internal to the company and not related to whatever technology you're picking. And it's basically true with any flavor of software whatsoever.
Yes, 100%. And I think for any account management team, as you're thinking about rolling out a new technology or adopting a new process, my recommendation is always to take baby steps. Pick the three most important tasks that you need to optimize and find a technology to support, and then add things in. It's it's like adopting a new habit, right? You don't want to just say, okay, well, I'm going to go start running 3 miles every day, and I'm going to eat only salads, or like people go on these health kicks and they try to do all of these things at one time, and it's too much change. So we, at Capta always were really good about saying, okay, let's just, what are the three main jobs to be done that you can transition into this tech, into this new process, into this new world. And then let's build on that as you grow, as your team matures, as you get used to the software. So any software that you're adopting, any new tool, if you can do it in that way, it's going to help the team adjust gradually over time with very clear success milestones. And it's really important, almost like a gamification for the team to say, oh, look at how this is improving, look at how this is changing our workflow. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the account management team needs to see the value, and it needs to be making their job easier, not harder.
So on that point, and so I'll just share for the audience. You've done a lot of deep work with a lot of companies that are deploying software for their account management teams, and we're not going to name them. We know who they are. You and I know who they are. We're not going to name them. But besides what you were just saying, which is baby steps and having clear milestones. So that's an important part of it. What are the other things that the really successful companies are doing right? Like, what are the things that you really want to be doing when you're embarking on this journey? Like, what did you see in your, internal checklist of like do's and don'ts?
Yeah. I think very clear leadership buy-in from the top is super critical. If your executive leadership team doesn't really believe in account management and customer centricity and doing these activities to drive growth and revenue, the trickle down effect is your account management and CS team becomes a firefighting support motion. If all the focus is on new logo acquisition and sales, and executive leadership is not really concerned about customer outcomes and the value that you're driving, it's going to show. It's going to show in the activities that are happening. If your team is not properly supported, meaning they have too many accounts per account manager, or they're handling a lot of support instead of tickets and things like that, that is going to be a huge indicator of whether or not they're going to be success. Because at the end of the day, an account manager cannot spend time on strategic priorities if they're constantly putting out fires. And if leadership doesn't care about that motion and it doesn't come from the top, it shows.
We've had a lot of discussion about that on this podcast about how to get leaders to to appreciate it. So for the most people, people give lip service to the idea that, oh yeah, we make most of our money off existing customers. But if you don't really understand the full economics of this, like how it actually works, then you don't live it every day. And so what I took away from that is there's kind of two things there. There's first, do we have overall sponsorship for the function of post-sales growth? Meaning, do people agree this is where our profits come from, this is where our revenue come from, we are going to invest in this team and we're going to make it work? So that's kind of question number one. Question number two then on the system side is, do we understand the distinction between a highly specialized account management tool and whatever else we just bought from Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever? And I think in our experience, that was a pretty difficult conversation too.
Yeah, sometimes even just getting your IT department or your technical team bought in on the idea of going out of the ecosystem of the box, the big box competitor, right, can be a challenge. And at the end of the day, we don't want our go-to-market teams operating in data silos. I think that's one of the really exciting things about AI and some of the automation that's coming out is it's really allowing organizations to make sense of a lot of data that they have in disparate systems and connecting that and identifying trends. There are a lot of tools coming up that are allowing go-to-market teams to orchestrate and make sense of data that are in different systems. So if you are operating in point solutions for customer support, for account management, for sales, marketing, that's okay, but you have to be able to use some kind of tool to bring that data together in a real-time fashion so that people can support in the best way.
So let's go back to what the best teams are doing right. So the first thing you said was leadership buy-in. You also talked about change management, taking baby steps, stuff like that. But what else do people have to get right in order to ensure success?
Clarity on what's driving the outcomes within your organization, the jobs to be done. Like I said, everyone needs to be bought in on the change process. If you have people who are not bought in, who are using spreadsheets when they're not supposed to be, when they're not updating the technology, I think from a leadership perspective, that's when a hard conversation needs to happen, right? Because the longer you let that go on, and that can happen with any tool that you implement, you're going to have someone who's not going to want to change. And you have to be able to coach and manage that as a leader. Because when you have one person who's not adopting the tool and you're creating problems for yourself. You're not going to have that visibility into what's going on in your accounts. So having really strong leadership and change management is crucial for success, and identifying those gaps in adoption, and actually hitting them in the head from the start and not brushing it under, right? I mean, I've had conversations with people before. It's like, well, I'm not going to fire my top salesperson or my top account manager because they're not updating the CRM. But what happens at the end of the day when you lose one of your big accounts and you have no visibility because nobody was updating? So if I'm responsible for 10 account managers and I just lost my big account and my CEO comes to me and says, what happened to this account? And I go look in my tool and my top account manager wasn't updating it. And I've just been letting it go because, well, they're great. Suddenly I'm answering to the CEO. I don't know why we lost this account. So
you have to think, everybody.
Yeah, you have to think about it from a CYA kind of point of view, right? So yeah, maybe they're doing their job. Maybe they're excellent at their job, but you don't want to be blindsided.
Well, even more than the CYA component, you got to look at this. The point here is you're trying to systematize and build a really good way of doing something. Like we're trying to get really good at how we expand our accounts and retain our accounts and no surprises and all this kind of stuff. And if we're relying on the heroics of an individual person to always just like get that deal at the last minute or come in for some miraculous save, and we're not building a system around it, then yes, we might have one or two really high performers on the team, but overall as a team, we're lagging behind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big part of the value proposition of these systems is we can raise the floor for people, right? We're setting a baseline of performance expectation, partly because we want everyone to be doing the same things, like following the same process and so on. And when you have people who are not on board or not behaving in that way, it's very easy for the team leader to be like, you know what, I don't need the conflict, I don't need this pain in the butt, I'm not going to go have this conversation. But you're ultimately handicapping yourself going forward because you're not getting the real power of building a system around what you're doing. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. The best people, come back to the point, the best people do, right? And the best teams understand that, and they create consistency with everyone to say, here's exactly what we're going to be doing. They invest, therefore, in the training and the change management and so on to do that. But they understand the value of creating a way of doing business for their account management team.
Yeah, I'm really glad you called that out, Alex, because I think that's a really important thing to note is that the system should be helping you from a leadership perspective to close the gap between your top performer and your bottom performers. It should also be helping you to onboard efficiently new team members, to transition accounts easily, to avoid the surprises, and create a consistent experience for your customers. Because as you're able to track and see what's working in your tooling, you're also be able to identify trends, playbooks, or things that are helping you to grow a specific segment of accounts. Without that visibility, without the tooling, it's really hard to get insight into that data.
I mean, look, to underscore this point about the consistent customer experience, we know that the biggest pain points for your customers are involved in the handoffs and the internal stuff inside your company. Like your customer doesn't care about your internal process and your internal gates and workflows and all this kind of stuff. They just want to get on with it, right? They want to be able to reach their goal as fast as possible. And if we're not providing good experience to our customers because our handoffs are a disaster, or because we don't have the data that we need, or because when some account managers out on vacation for their honeymoon for a couple of weeks, everything falls apart, that is a terrible customer experience. And I think like looking at it through that lens is really, really helpful here, because we also tend to over-orient on our internal mechanics versus what is the customer actually getting out of this. And there's so many areas where we can improve the experience with our customer if we were just to kind of get out of our own way a little bit, right? But you've seen real examples of companies deploying this stuff with a customer frame of mind, with a customer point of view, to improve the service that they're giving to their clients, right?
Yeah, 100%. You can tell right away in conversations with account management teams and leaders whether or not they're truly thinking about the customer in this process. And it shows in the way that they're thinking about how to structure their account plans or their business reviews, how they're thinking about renewal process, right? It becomes very, very obvious in the way that they talk about all of that. Yeah.
And what's the orientation there? So, and I'm wondering if we've got examples. I know that we had at Captain, we had customers who were very successful in the loyalty space and in the logistics space and the insurance space. We had customers that were really doing really great things there, looking at this from their client point of view. I want to hear like real examples if you have some to share.
Some examples of companies that I've seen do a really good job of adopting this customer centricity within their account management practice is to roll out voice of customer discovery program and using these really great strategic questions to understand what matters to their stakeholders, and then designing their account management strategy around that. Not every customer is going to want to engage in the same way. Not every customer has the same requirements. And so really understanding what matters to them, what's going to help them achieve results, and then building that into your practice, right? We used to see a lot of kind of outdated account management methodologies when the early days of CAPTA, where people had really big QBR decks. I would say, thankfully, those have really gone away in the last couple of years. I haven't seen one of those in a while, which is nice. And people are really starting to come around. Organizations are starting to come around and understand that the better they understand their clients and what makes them successful, the better they're going to be at delivering value and retaining them, which obviously means more stable revenue growth for the organization. So yeah, I've seen a number of companies be very successful in adopting this strategy and rolling this out. It always started with a very clear vision from leadership, really collaborative communication throughout the implementation, and understanding what they were working towards and celebrating those wins as they were going along.
So we talked a little bit about what the best teams do for deploying software and making sure they're avoiding the most common landmines. But one of the main pieces of resistance, and by the way, this is true with pretty much every software I've ever seen in my whole career, is what's in it for the end user and being very clear about that. So often if that's not articulated or if people don't really believe it, then guess what? You're not going to get the results. You're not going to get the adoption. You're going to be frustrated or dissatisfied with the process. In your experience, Jen, looking at the value proposition for specific software for account management teams, when you look at that, what's in it for me, that WIFM question, how were the best leaders answering that? What were the things that the account managers were actually benefiting from this software? The reason I'm asking is, it's easy to look at something like this or a CRM or any type of tool and say, oh, this is a system for managers, right? Managers are going to get some benefit out of it. They're going to get reporting. They're going to spy on me. People get all these stories in their heads. But at the end of the day, we had a lot of very successful customers who did get it right. But I'm wondering if you can help us distill this, like, what's in it for me down for us.
Yeah. It is having one place to store all of your customer knowledge that you've been working on. For example, I had a client that I was working with for 5 years. I had 5 years of notes, customer calls, customer strategy, buying reasons, voice of customer interviews, all in one place. This made it very easy for me to go back and provide historical context when it came time to have renewal discussions, when it came time to say, okay, this is what we decided 6 months ago that we were going to work on. This is where we're at in that project. Not to age myself, but I cannot remember all of those details for every client, right? So for me, it was crucial to have a spot to document all of that and to stay on track. Otherwise, you're just kind of winging it, and you don't really have a strategy for how you're managing accounts. So if you have a notebook, for example, and you're on a call with a client and you're going through your notebook and you're trying to remember, what did we say 6 months ago? I actually had somebody who left their notebook on a train and lost all of their client notes, right? So having it all in one place is going to help you remember what you discussed, but it also helps you to be able to uncover insights and trends. One of the biggest successes I had with a client in the logistics space is I went out on site and realized that they were tracking risk that was coming up in their account portfolio in a spreadsheet. They couldn't tell when the spreadsheet was being updated. They couldn't tell who owned where it was at in the process. And they had no way to make sense of that risk data, right? Because it was in this spreadsheet that's just sitting on someone's desktop or in a Google Drive. Putting that into a tool where you can actually track and have ownership and see trends allows the organization to make better business decisions. So what we found out was, hey, the number one risk type was RFP. The second risk type was service issues. Guess what? We're winning out all of those RFP risks. They're all being marked closed success, which means we're winning out on pricing, right? When there's a service issue, that's when we have problems. So they knew suddenly that they really needed to focus on resolving those service issues. That they had been tracking this in spreadsheets for years. They didn't have that insight. They put it into a tool that had a dashboard that allowed tracking, that allowed that visibility. And suddenly they were able to make sense of their data. And I think that's a really powerful message for account management teams is, yeah, you can put your notes in a spreadsheet. You can put all of this data in other tools. People use Microsoft Teams. People use Google Sheets. It's all notepads all over the place. But you can't easily access that data or see it in a way that allows you to make the right decisions. And I think that's the really important differentiator. And when you have one person who's going rogue, you always have one spreadsheet person. They're like, no, I don't want to use this tool. I'm going to use my spreadsheet. You know, no offense to the spreadsheet people, but there's always one, and it creates a gap in the knowledge because somebody's not adopting it. So yes, it seems like a tool for your leadership team, but it's actually a tool for you to do a better job, to avoid the surprises, to help your leadership, your company make better decisions.
Yeah, and by the way, it's going to suggest next steps. It's going to tell you, where you are, where your blind spots might be. So, one of the things that always happens is we think we know more about our customer than we actually do. And so having a tool that has a methodology will actually allow you to surface blind spots or potential risks and then help you go solve those and query those. And it's going to give you a system. By the way, like these things are designed to take work off your plate, to make your life easier. And if you do this stuff, guess what? You're going to make more money. You're going to be more successful as an account manager. You're going to get promoted. You're going to get more recognition. Like people are going to finally understand what you do all day. Those are pretty significant benefits as well. And a lot of people, in my mind, kind of hide behind the art of account management as opposed to the science, right? Mm-hmm. And yes, there's elements of both of this, but when you use the tools that help you, kind of manage this as a science, guess what? You can get a lot more effective. And to your point, it's easy to the point that you made earlier, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I've got everything in my head. I know this customer. I've been working with them for 5 years. I've got all the information I need. You can't do that. It's simply not possible to do that once your portfolio is like over 5 or 10 accounts. Like you just can't. You can't carry all this stuff in your head. You're putting way too much mental burden on yourself. And so that's something that's a very real, it's simple, it's very, very real benefit.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to touch on that point that you called out about just identifying the work that you're doing, and having that visibility within a tool is really powerful for you to be able to explain your value when it comes time for reviews. If something comes up with an account, you can say, look, this is where I identified this. This is how I was handling it. If you're out on PTO, you're out of office and something comes up, someone can support you. I have talked to so many account management teams who didn't have a tool before, coming to CAPTA or adopting whatever tool you're implementing. And it's really hard to take vacation and have somebody support your account when there's not a central repository that everybody can access and say, okay, this is what's going on. This is what we discussed. So data hygiene is always important, no matter what tool you're using, and adopting a consistent practice where you're getting in there, you're updating it. I always told people, just make time on your calendar and make it a routine. I had a routine where I would not book back-to-back calls. So I had 10 minutes to put my notes in, right? If for some reason I had back-to-back calls or I couldn't get to it, I always did it before the end of the day. Now you have call recorders, you have AI tools that are taking summaries. They're not always accurate. So I like to take my own notes, but it also helps me remember. It helps me submit to memory what we talked about.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I want to say one more thing about this performance review discussion. So performance reviews for account managers are great when you're hitting your retention numbers and you're hitting your expansion numbers. Right? Then you can kind of expect to breeze through it. But when you are not, or if you're having a challenging quarter or year, guess what? Having all this stuff in a tool so you can document, like Jen was just saying, very clearly to your boss, here's what happened, here's what I did, here's the impact, et cetera, et cetera. Guess what? You look smarter, you're buying a lot of goodwill, you're probably buying yourself time if you're in a really, really tough spot, right? but you also then are starting to look like leadership material because you're taking your work seriously.
Yeah.
And so if part of what you want to do is get promoted and advance in your career, and you want to have these kind of structured conversations with your boss, your manager about this, going to them with a plan and being very diligent and very thoughtful about this is the best way to get that promotion. And storing all this stuff doesn't have to be a huge amount of work, but it's all there. So I think that that performance review comment, totally 100%, something that gets massively overlooked. All right. So last little piece here. How does someone know when they're ready or when they're not ready to bring in specialized software? Like I said, I get this conversation all the time. Most people who ask, I get this question all the time. Most people who ask me, they're way too early. Right there is they should be doing lots of other things before they think about software. So in your mind, Jen, what are some of the decision points that someone should be thinking about to know, am I ready or not?
Well, I think, are things falling through the cracks? Are there gaps in our tech stack that's not able to support what we need to do? Does the team have the capacity to adopt and learn a new tool? Sometimes we need to pause and hire someone first to shift around the bandwidth so that they can actually support from a strategic perspective before we can even consider adopting a new tool. I think it's also very important to look at the current tech stack to really understand where are the gaps. I mean, I think I've probably onboarded at least 5 customers who paused and then went and tried to do what they needed to do in their current tech stack, whether it be a combination of CRM, support tools, Miro, Asana, all the project management tools, Teams, and then come back and say, okay, yeah, we don't have the proper tools. And I think it's really clearly understanding where the gaps are in your process and that the tech is not supporting. So to your point, buying an account management software when you're not actually doing account management, obviously that's not the best idea. So does that answer your question, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I will offer to people who are listening, who are ready who think they're ready to get down this journey, is are we starting from scratch or are we optimizing something we're already doing? The software piece is very good at optimizing. So if we already have a good QBR process, but we're struggling with reminders and we're struggling with the process and consistency, but we're doing it, then great. That's a perfect use case where software can be helpful. Similarly, if we have account plans and we're doing them, but right now we're doing them on paper napkins or we're doing them in PowerPoint, and we want a way to be able to share and collaborate and get more clarity and do reporting and stuff like that, then again, that's a great use of specialized tool.
Yeah.
However, if I simply just think to myself, oh, I would like the team to be doing account plans, that's not a good reason to go buy software. I would like the team to start doing QBRs is not a good reason to go buy software. And so it's more like, at least the way I think about it is, are we optimizing something or improving something that we already have the behavior for, or are we starting from scratch? And in my experience, the people who were optimizing had way higher chances of success. It was smoother, it was easier. They were getting their results. They were getting there faster versus the ones who were essentially saying, I want to overly lean on the software because we don't actually know what we're doing yet. We're still in that learning phase as a team. Those were much more likely to fail in my experience.
Yes, and I think it's also important when you're evaluating software to find a software that's going to grow with you. And hopefully your vendor that you're choosing can meet you where you're at. I've talked to people who have bought software before that was over-engineered and way too much for what they needed. And they went with the full rollout, and it wasn't, when you have a lot of things within your tooling that are not being used and it's overly complicated, your adoption is going to suffer. So when you're evaluating software, whether or not it's something that you can grow into. So if you're not doing account plans yet, can you turn it on later? Can you start with the basics, and as your team grows, expand within the tooling? That's a great sign, right? Just like when you're looking for a job, is this a job I can grow into? Is this job going to allow me the capacity to grow in my skill set and my responsibilities? It's the same thing with software, right? Because it takes a long time to implement a new tool. It takes a long time to adopt it, to integrate it within your tech stack. You don't want to buy a tool that is only going to support where you're at right now, or maybe is over engineered for what you need, and you can't pare it back. I don't know if that's helpful, but I would consider that in my selection. And then with AI, everything's changing so rapidly. There's so many new tools coming out on the market. There's so many other options. I think we're seeing a lot of people get stuck in decision mode because of that. Really pulling back on long-term contracts because of that. And just having that flexibility of being able to shift gears if they need to is becoming more important as we're seeing things changing rapidly in the market.
And we should note that you are leading our AI Fundamentals for Account Managers program inside of Amplify right now. It just kicked off this week, and this is a 4-part series on AI and how it can be used as a tool to really help us be more effective and more efficient as account managers. You and I are going to do a follow-up podcast episode directly on that, but for now, just on the conversation here around tooling, here's what I want to leave for listeners. Yes, these software programs, specialized software, can be very helpful for you in hitting your goals of retention and expansion and visibility. It can be very, very helpful for that. And at the same time, don't assume that the software is going to solve all the problems that you have in your team and in your approach. So think about it as part of the solution, part of the journey, and make sure that you're still at the same time figuring out the mechanics, the team stuff, the training, the change management, all that in order to really be even more effective out there. That's how I think about this. I know it's a big decision for people, but and there are a lot of moving parts. So Jen, great to see you. Thanks for joining, and thanks for this overview on the tech stack.
Thank you, Alex. It's been great chatting about this, and look forward to discussing AI in a future episode.
Sounds great.